Okay, so to give you a brief overview, quickly some housekeeping rules. So please make sure you've got your name entered so that, once we do get into the discussion, we know who's speaking and who's asking. If you could keep your microphones muted until you're actually saying something, that'd be great, just so we're not interrupting the speakers. If you'd like to say something, please feel free to raise your hand or, wave around in your video. And if you prefer, you can also make input in the chat function. So make comments or ask questions and so on. It's whatever you feel more comfortable with. And of course, I don't think we need to say this, but it's also always good to remember, please do be respectful and use appropriate language. And then, so about this network. So the ECOP network was set up by the ambassadors that I mentioned. We have 4 ambassadors that work with EMB. And they are trying to connect the early career ocean professionals who are based at EMB members. And they set up this network together with us to really enable those early career researchers not only to sort of connect and meet their peers at different organizations across Europe, but also to have a voice at EMB level. And as part of that, we've launched this ECOP Wednesdays webinar series. Of course, it isn't just closed to those who are at EMB member organizations, or indeed those who identify as early career ocean professionals. We're happy to see everybody coming here and engaging with what we have to say. But the aim of the series is really to kind of talk about different aspects of the marine science policy landscape and where relevant, highlight possibilities, opportunities, and topics of interest for early career ocean professionals. So we've got a really interesting topic coming up today, and we're really looking at the ocean art and science collaborations. And for that, we've got 2 speakers. So we have Julia, who's based at Cobra Collective, who are in the UK. And we also have Alexandra, who's based at IOPAN in Poland. So I'll hand you over first to Julia, and I think Alexandra will speak after. Guys, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you so much, Paula. And if you can just allow me to share my screen. Great. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here and really appreciate being able to talk about this to all of you. And yeah, I'd just like to start off by kind of talking a bit about why ocean art science collaborations are relevant, especially in the context of the UN decade. So for the UN decade, I'm sure you all know, we have kind of the different 7 decade outcomes for what we would like our relationship to the ocean and the ocean to look like by the end of the decade. And one of the outcomes is this idea of having an inspiring and engaging ocean. So having created different relationships for people where they appreciate or value or maybe connect to the ocean in different ways. And I think it's especially this kind of decade outcome where most of the art science discussions usually start with this idea is, oh, isn't this great? Isn't this the perfect space to bring in art as a different way of inspiring people, motivating them, kind of sharing what we know about the ocean and highlighting the importance of it. And I think that is also kind of this very obvious and really great starting point for it. But there's also different ways how we can think about art and science and how we can bring them together and have them interact. So this is kind of an idea from a paper that we wrote thinking about maybe the different dimensions that art science collaborations can have, depending on sort of what their focus is and where they start. And I like to call them different dimensions because I think they really are like some ideas. This doesn't mean that every collaboration falls into one of these 3 categories or that, one category excludes the other or anything like that. They're just different ways for thinking about how different disciplines and people can come together. And so the first one is really this idea of science communication, which is maybe where a lot of the kind of inspiring and engaging ocean discourse starts. So this idea that we have some insights about the ocean that we would like to communicate to the public and to share that. So maybe as scientists, we recruit artists to help us create art that really communicates that. So something that's really focused on kind of transferring knowledge and that's really close to the ecological principles and the kind of scientific findings that we want to communicate. So that's maybe one dimension. Another dimension is the idea of like sci art. So that maybe starts more from an artist perspective. That's about sort of taking environmental data or maybe ecological concepts as inspiration for a project. And here the focus could be more on maybe presenting things in an unexpected way, or making really cool metaphors or new ways of putting things together that can lead to interesting questions or interesting ways of thinking about it. But here the focus is maybe more on sort of these general ideas and maybe less on really, communicating very specific outcomes or environmental ideas. And then the kind of third dimension is this idea of art science. So what would it be like to have these really like transdisciplinary teams, so really coming together really before starting the project and thinking about what are the type of questions that we want to ask together, and also having this in this kind of iterative process of what are the insights we can take from either discipline, and then what can we create with this that leads to maybe more questions or designing experiments together. And I think here the focus, as we kind of understand it, is really more on the process of working together and kind of coming to new insights together. And the idea of art science doesn't come kind of from us, but it comes from the Art Science Manifesto that was developed by Ruth Bernstein et al. That kind of also defines art science as this idea of connecting and synthesizing artistic and scientific modes of inquiry and kind of, trying to rehumanize and reintegrate knowledge. So creating something new together. And where we think this could be especially useful in the context of the UN decade is to really focus on either very specific topics or very specific places and really develop this more like long-term engagement. So what would it look like in one place to really bring together scientists, artists, but also other stakeholders, and develop this kind of long-term engagement that can lead to new scientific discoveries and insights, but also automatically kind of communicating them, as well as, taking inspiration to what the scientific research should focus on. So yeah, that's kind of a brief introduction, I think, to how I understand kind of art science collaborations and the different ways they can come to be. And from that, I'd like to maybe just take a step back and talk a bit about sort of my journey, I guess, to, how I came to be thinking about these topics and talking about them here. And so there's many different ways, I guess, we can tell a story about ourselves. I really wanted to tell my story with this image of this nice little blue blob that shows sort of some fixed points that brought me here. But I found it really important to show it not as a sort of very clear linear timeline of things, but to kind of show this kind of messy nature of things. So I started out in the kind of natural sciences, and then with a few stops on the way that I'm going to talk about in a second, ended up now in this kind of more art science space. But obviously at the time it didn't often feel very coherent and clear. And I think all these things were sort of very connected in the way that one thing led to another, or sort of working on one topic or with one concept opened up new things for me. But obviously it's kind of a very messy process. So I like the image of the blue blob to represent that a little bit. And I think what really drove this process for me were lots of different questions about what I wanted to focus on. And I like the way of imagining them as this little swarm of jellyfish questions that were just always in my head and kind of drove what I wanted to do. So yeah, when I started my bachelor, I was kind of really interested in this idea of what are some like holistic approaches, how we can kind of combine social and ecological well-being. And I worked on a blue carbon mangrove project. And through that, I kind of came on to really thinking about how can we promote equity in research and also more epistemic justice in terms of different types of knowledge and insights from different disciplines, different groups of people, what are ways how we can really value kind of traditional or indigenous knowledge. So then in my master thesis, I was working in a coastal community in Sri Lanka, and was really thinking about these questions. What does it mean to do kind of participatory research in this way? How can we integrate research and action in a way that's kind of meaningful for everyone involved, but not in a kind of white savior type of way, of course, but just in a way that, that feels like there's some kind of meaningful academic and practical insights that are emerging in some way. And then I finished my master's during the times of COVID, and I guess as lots of people had a really bad time. And so this made me think more and more about really these questions of like, well, what do I want to focus on in terms of what gives me actually hope and energy, and where does kind of the way my brain and body works really fit in terms of which context, which people do I want to work with, and who do I want to learn from? And I think especially these last questions are really what brought me to the ArtScience collaborations, because over the last 2 years, I was then working kind of as a freelance consultant on different projects. And I just noticed that this was just a field that gave me a lot of hope and inspiration. And I felt really good working on this and working with these people. So I wanted to, keep going in this way. And I guess I like this idea of kind of thinking about we create our own little ecosystem, maybe, of the different places, people, communities, and networks that gives us energy or safety or the different things that we need. And I think for me, it was really helpful to think about what do I like to do, and kind of what places or what networks do I want to be part of that maybe foster that for me somehow. So I just noticed for me, I really enjoy being part of and kind of working with different communities, different groups of people. And so the ICMARA network then was one of these groups for me, where I felt like I was really getting a lot of kind of inspiration, but also being really part of a community of early career researchers doing things together. And that was really important for me. And I like the idea that obviously our little ecosystem looks very different for each of us, but that it's somehow important to think about these things and to think about what we expect from the maybe from what we need in terms of the research that we want to do. But I know that obviously this is also a very big privilege to be able to think about, what are the things that I would like to do, or what are the types of networks or people I would like to work with, and that sort of we can only really think about these things when we're in a place that allows us or enables us to think about them. So I'm sure many of you know Maslow's pyramid of needs, and kind of the idea that we can only engage in those maybe more theoretical questions or philosophical questions once our basic needs are met. And this is a concept that we also worked on in a paper with some people from the ICMARA community, where we thought about sort of obstacles for early career researchers that engage in knowledge co-production, so any type of more kind of transdisciplinary research. And many of us had a similar sort of story of starting in the natural sciences and then moving on to kind of the more social sciences. And so we took this metaphor of Maslow's pyramids of needs and kind of turned it into this figure, what you can see here, which really shows the importance of institutions to support maybe different types of research, also different types of research outputs, and that really you can't engage maybe on those other things if you don't have this kind of basic level of support. And then maybe on top of that, it's really important obviously to have this type of community, and I guess the ECOP community is another example of trying to create the space for people to support each other, the type of relationship that you have with your supervisors. And maybe then kind of, if all these other things are a given, it's really important to maybe reflect on these questions of what is important for me, how do I want to work. But I just feel like it's so important to acknowledge that going into these maybe other types of collaborations or new fields can only happen if we have the support from our institutions. Because I guess especially as early career researchers, it's maybe easy to feel like, oh no, why, like I should do this, why can't I do this? And it might be because we just really don't have the support to be able to do that at the moment. This just feels really important for me to stress. But it also feels a bit of a heavy thing to say always. So I'm happy to maybe switch over from this more kind of heavy topic to telling you about something really exciting, which is the main project that Alexandra and I want to share with you today, which is the Exquisite Corpse project that we did last year. And I'm going to explain the name in a moment. But we called this presentation a space to connect for people, and because that's what it really felt like for me or for us. And I just want to give you, a moment to maybe read some of the quotes from these people here. Those are not everyone, but most people with whom we did with this project. And yeah, these are some of their kind of reflections of what it felt like for them, or kind of the main things that they took from it. So yeah, I'll just give you a few seconds to read some of them. So yeah, hopefully this just gave you kind of a little insight, and I really like the idea of putting these quotes here and kind of letting the people speak a bit for themselves. So to tell you a bit more about the project itself, so the Exquisite Corpse project, it's a collaborative art project that we did with a kind of mixed group of artists and ocean scientists over the last year. And the basic idea is that you create art together. Everyone creates art projects that are then exchanged with each other. And you might know, I think you will know the concept already, and also where the name comes from. Because there's a children's game that kind of goes like this, and maybe you can see the idea already from the clip of the video here. So it's this idea that you create this, exquisite corpse together. That's basically different people create different parts of a project that's then put together. So it's this idea that you start from some kind of shared inspiration. So in our case, there's a kind of an initial prompt that was related to ocean science, and then you create an art project from it, and then you pass it on to another person who only sees kind of what the person before them did, and then kind of creates a project responding to it. So in this nice visual metaphor, kind of creating then the body of our little monster person character here. And then you pass that on to another person who creates kind of the last part of it. So yeah, that's kind of the idea of the Exquisite Corpse more generally. But the way that we did it in this project is that we started with a seed that was our topic was extreme ocean events. So we focused on the underwater volcano explosion in Tonga last year, and so we had this initial prompt from it, and then everyone in our group has 2 weeks to create a project about it, and it can be any art project, any medium, kind of anything goes. And then the only limitation is that you won't have 2 weeks time to create it. And after 2 weeks, you pass your project to another person and you receive a new project from someone else. And then this project that you receive is your new inspiration. And then you have 2 weeks again to create a project and you exchange it with someone else. So you're kind of creating, everyone is creating art individually, but in this, but still in this kind of group process. So to give you some examples of the pieces that we created, this is one set of projects that kind of built on each other. So on the left, you can see Diego created this painting and kind of combined it with this poem, and then he passed it on to Tamara. Tamara created the second painting, and then she passed her painting on to Alison, and Alison created this last painting. And what I think is interesting is that you can see, so Alison never saw Diego's project. She only saw Tamara's painting, but there's still kind of visually a lot of similarity in the projects that they created. And Alexandra is gonna show you another set of projects in much more detail. So so we can really talk about them. This was just kind of to give you the main idea. And so you can see this is kind of an overview of like the different projects that were created. So there's I think over 30 different little projects that we created in this project. And after 6 weeks, then we have a party where everyone comes together and kind of we look at the pieces together and kind of reflect on what is the inspiration that we took from each other and how did we build on each other's pieces. And I guess the kind of theory behind the Exquisite Corpse process, or why this can be helpful, is that it's this idea of kind of the iceberg for kind of how we work. So we have our kind of visible behaviors that we do, or kind of the art we create in the world, but then underneath, sort of inside, we have our attitudes, our worldviews, our values. And the idea is that through the Exquisite Corpse project, you kind of express some of the things that are going on inside you, and kind of maybe express some of your values and values in the art that you create. But then by, engaging with how other people responded to the same prompt, you are maybe also prompted to kind of question, your own beliefs. And so I think the idea is that in this process, you can kind of really have these conversations. What are your needs? What are your values and worldviews? And this is really important for, I think, working together across the art and science space, because something that we so often hear is that people maybe don't have shared understandings of the world or have different language to describe things. And so I think this process can be really helpful and kind of, giving people a space to talk about this and a space to connect. And maybe just to kind of summarize where we went with this process. So we did this, we did this process for 6 weeks. We had our party and talked about the different kind of ways of kind of different ideas that emerged to this process. And we presented it at a conference. And then we also presented this at the American Geophysical Union virtual art exhibition that was held a few months ago. So I'm not going to show you the whole video, but the exhibition is still open, and I think Paula will send you a link to the exhibition later. So, but we kind of showcased, some of the projects that we did here. If you're curious, you can check them out later, and you can also check out kind of the exhibition itself, because I think it's a really great example for lots of cool art science initiatives. And also this kind of online exhibition space was just a very cool way to bring it all together and to allow people to visit that. Yes, maybe just show you one more. So this was just a little sneak peek into that. And now I'd like to hand you over to Alexandra, and Alexandra is going to tell you first a little bit about her and sort of her research interest and journey, and then also our exquisite corpse process in more detail. So
okay, thank you, Julia, so much. When you showed the slides and the exhibition, I remembered our atmosphere that we had when doing the exquisite corpse of this perfect family, which whatever weird things you do in art, you get accepted. And I felt really warm remembering this time. And I hope we will do it again, because it made my science life also much richer than it was. Okay, so a few words about myself. My name is Alexandra. I'm a satellite oceanographer. By training, I studied in University of Bremen. And most of my science life, I worked with phytoplankton. So very small species in the Arctic, so in the changing place where the climate changes, you could see it very easily. Since 2015, I've been engaged in different popular science activities, such as I made the science theater, which I would show in a minute, and also I organized things like science picnics, when you try to make children interested in the science you do, and show it in a simple way, and engage them. So this was the point. And also most of my science career, I was engaged in different art projects. So for me, this art and science topic was always in the air. And now that we worked with Julia, it got actually some things that happened in life. So I would like to show you a little bit of the science theater that I did. how did I come up to this idea? So I was teaching oceanography in the university with students, and they, as students are, often they were not very interested in just lectures by themselves. So I thought, okay, how could I make it more interactive and engage them so they could not only read about phytoplankton, but actually experience how is it to be floating phytoplankton in the sea. So what sounds do you hear? What is the temperature? What is the atmosphere there? So something like that. And I then also studied, I was teaching, but I also was studying in the theater department. And I asked my teacher if she could help me to direct a science theater. And she agreed. So I took 12 brave students who who agreed to this idea. And for 3 months we were rehearsing. And then, so first we were watching just some science videos. Then we tried to duplicate the moves of the water, of the fish. And then we played with visuals of how we want the light to be, and then with the sound. And in the end, I think we came to a really unique idea of a sound that we wanted not to have any music, but we decided to do it live. And the sound was our breath. So you could see it on the photo of me with the microphone. So if we were 13 people now, if 13 people breathe really heavily, so like this, and if you mix it together, you get the sound of the ocean, more or less. And so this was our first we did the sound, and then we moved to the sound and showed different parts of phytoplankton life in spring and in winter. Yes, and can we switch to the next slide? So after this project, which was just my hobby, but I had so much fun with this. I hope I could repeat it someday. I also got benefits for my science work. That's what I want to stress. So because I looked at the problem not only in the linear way, when you have a method that you know how to study this area and you always do it like straight, but here I looked from the other part, and I think my intuition started to work better, not only logic but also intuition. And I wrote a proposal which got accepted, and then I'm now a PI of the project, which I got after this activity. And also I think when I do science, I think more of how can I change the method that exists, or what is there that I maybe don't see. So I always question myself much more, and it brings really new ideas, which of course sometimes they don't make any sense, but sometimes they do help. So this is what I wanted to say about the benefits of combining art and science. And now I also would like to go to our joint project with Julia, which was, as Julia showed, about the extreme ocean events. And we did it in the form of exquisite corpse. So I would like to do it interactively. So first, I would show you so for you to become us, more or less, you would see the same things we saw, and I will ask you, what would you have done with these images? So first I would show the seed, something we got as an inspiration, and then we had 2 weeks to react and to produce some kind of art as a response to it. So let's first see the seed. This is about volcano eruption in Tonga Islands, and this video shows some interviews with the people, with the locals that got affected, how their life changed, how they were shocked, some episodes from the news of how these waves after the eruption went across the ocean and reached different parts of the world, and how there was no connection to the island for several days. So this was really a natural disaster. No? So Julia will show also some parts of this event. No. It's 8 minutes long, so we will not show all of it, but just so you have the idea of the scale. Yeah, okay, thank you, Julia. And this was the first piece, which was made by Alison. And as you see, she made it as a collage. So I will just cite her words. She said that she went around her house and tried to look for the circular shapes, because you saw this eruption was more or less a circle, and then of these waves coming around it. So the waves are shown with these lines that she cut, and in the base of collage you could see a mandala, which she made it at some point, and on top of it she put some parts of the journals that she could find that were connected to the sea. And what's interesting for me here is that you could see on the left side there is a lighthouse and a ship, and these symbols, they appeared in many images or in many parts of our artwork absolutely independently. So many people thought of a lighthouse maybe as a sign of hope, or of something that can actually take you out of this situation of being inside a volcano eruption. And it's interesting that she has it, as many of us also did. Okay, and now let's move to the artwork that another person, Anna, did based on this one. And I will ask you to write your impressions about this, or what do you think did she mean by reacting in this way to a previous collage? Your feelings, and what would you do if you got such an artwork, something like that. Okay, can I open? So as you can see, this is an unusual media, no? Not very straightforward, and we were quite surprised. Oh, the use of red fruit represents the death of those affected by the explosion. Yes, this could be. That's really. Anna also said that there is this dark part. I don't know if you see my mouse. I guess not. No. So there's this dark part with the berries, no, with the blackberries, and that it represents the darkness in the previous collage. So yes, this is. I think she had the similar impression of death. For me, it is using everyday items to present something extraordinary. Yes, this is true. So I think it's really artist's way of thinking that she looked at her. This is a lemon cake. She looked at the lemon cake and thought, why? I also could use it as a representation of a volcano. Why not? Yeah. Yes. So what's interesting, I think, is that to trace this link between the two pieces. So, for example, you see she also has the part of the newspaper. So she tried to duplicate the collage feeling. And then all the shapes, like these pieces of mango, which are made in stripes, are the same lines that were there in the previous work. And I also liked that if you bake a lemon cake, you have to put it in the oven, no? So the oven could also be a metaphor for the volcano in a way, because it's the heat is there as well. Okay, so thank you, Paula and Angela for responding. And let's go to the next piece, which was mine. So let's do the same. Maybe first let's see some parts, and then I will please give me your impressions of what do you think I wanted to express here. Julia, maybe also we could show just different parts of the videos, like not the whole one because it's quite long. No? And then maybe in the end we could just put a pause, no? Like here, for example. Yeah, it would be nice. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. That's true that I am the volcano. Yes, I thought that there should be something inside which starts peacefully, and then it goes with more and more energy. And yes, that you could really see the impact. I'm replying to the comment. You represent the volcano and your hands show the impact that cannot be completely undone. Yes. La montée des eaux, tsunami. Yeah, the movements of water. True. The use of gray reminds me of ash. Yes. Yes. Thank you. What I want to also to stress here is that I also try to not only to give my impression of volcano, but to link this piece to the previous piece. And as you could see, I was still giving this. You could see here this heart shape in the end, which looks like the strawberry shapes that we saw previously on the cake. And that from one hand, volcano is of course a disruptive force, but then also it's like a transmission that after the volcano you see that nature takes it back and grows again. So there is also something good in this event. And how I decided to do this carpet story is because I had a carpet at home that when I was speaking on the phone, for example, I always petted it, and then I saw that you could see the patterns, and I thought like, this is a nice place to do some experiments here. So yes, great, thank you for your replies, and let's go see all the 4 pieces together. To the next slide. Yes, so you see that though it's very, very different media, but the shapes are more or less the same, and like you could see some connection between them. And for me, this is the beauty of this exquisite corpse project, that you get something like a common mind between the people, that you get to understand how others see these events and the world from the perspective that you never would have thought yourself. I would never have thought of food art,